Hello and welcome back to Ducktail Dads, a Lorcana podcast with some flavoring of dad things. My name's Ryan. I am one of your voices on this talking podcast that you're listening to. And I recently had a new water system installed in my home because we forgot to take care of the last one that we had. So that was a big mistake. So, PSA to all listeners out there, if you're living in a home that you own or need to take care of, make sure you continually take care of the water systems and the soft water systems and the drinking water stations that you have set up, because that stuff does need maintenance, and I found that out this week. I am joined by two friends, Mack and Nathaniel, that are both great Lorcana players and have a lot of great insights. Mack, what is new in your world?
Yeah, hey Ryan, nice to talk to you again on this mighty fine day chatting about Lorcana. What's new in my world, non-Lorcana related, my wife and I took a little one over to the zoo this past week, and my son is still talking about it. I mean, he's still talking about how he got to see the lions, the tigers, the bears, and the snow leopards. So he's just been absolutely jazzed. So we're definitely starting to think about our next trip back to the zoo, and it's just been absolutely wonderful to see the joy on his face when he's talking about those things. So that's kind of the big thing that's happened through my life, non-Lorcana related.
Nathaniel, what would you like to piggyback off of that heartwarming update from Mac?
Man, tough to follow up. Mine are far less heartwarming, but I'll do two small parts. The first is not Lorcana related. Puppy is about 10 months old. She's been waking up a little bit more overnight, and as we know as dads, right, not fun to be waking up overnight all the time. Um, so we got her a new kennel that has a better like mattress type thing in it, right? So she kind of gets maybe a little bit extra cozy and sleeps for longer stretches. Stop waking us up overnight. Um, the other is a Lorcana related one. I officially have my Honey Wizard playmat. I think it's absolutely outstanding.
Ooh.
I don't love spending money, but for something as good as this, for $20, it has brought a huge smile to my face.
Congratulations on finding that mat in the wild. I'm glad that you found its way into your hands. That's incredible. It is a beautiful playmat, beautiful artwork. And don't you have card sleeves?
I do have the matching card sleeves, and we'll get to that later. But they are also very very nice. They look beautiful. I think the artwork has got to be S tier level artwork on the card, even if the card itself kind of sucks.
It's a very bland card, that's for sure. All right. Well, jumping into this episode, we want to talk about how to get started in Lorcana. So, anybody new to the game or trying to get restarted in the game, what are the things to think about? What are some of the common questions that get asked, and what are our answers to that? So, I'll pose the first question to you as a very, very broad question. Take it however you would like. But what advice do you have for a brand new player getting into the game of Lorcana?
I think I would, and Mac has touched on this a few times in some of our prior conversations, right? But the first thing is determining what are you in it for? Are you somebody who wants to be really competitive and play, S tier meta decks and compete in those areas? Are you somebody who kind of likes to have more fun with playing the game itself? Maybe you're making fun builds that have synergies, or are you more in this for the collecting aspect? I think that's a big thing early on to determine. When I first got into the game, I don't think I was necessarily any one direction, and I think because of that, right, I didn't have a direction for the first set that I was playing the game, which would have been set 4. And so I think I didn't figure that out for a while, and that's okay. I think you can take time to figure out what you're in the actual game itself for. Um, but I think in terms of collecting the cards, I think that's where you can probably more quickly sort of either get caught up in like the chase for cards and you're opening lots of sealed product. I think that's where you want to be a little bit careful of. But also, if you're new to the game, don't necessarily just stream, right? Like I think it's called net decking, I think was the term I was introduced to by Connor. But, don't just necessarily look at a deck and say, hey, that's performing really well. I'm just going to buy that exact deck and play with that right out of the gate because you don't necessarily know how it plays. Like take some time to learn the game first. I did make that mistake, I think, of kind of saying like, "Ooh, wow, green steel, that looks really strong," and I I like the way Zan plays. I'm just gonna get that deck right, and without really truly understanding the mechanics of the game.
Right on.
Yet when I got that.
We can. I'm curious to hear you expand on those thoughts and those comments when we think about more how to choose an ink color, because I think you have some very good insight that you shared with me when I started.
Hmm.
Mac, what advice do you have for new players?
Oh gosh, I think my number one piece of advice is establish your budget, especially if you have a spouse or a young family like we do. Establishing that first primary budget, I think, will go a long way into saving your marriage. But no, uh, no. The one thing that I don't think when I first got into it, truly realizing that it takes a substantial amount of capital to get into the game. Especially just
Hmm.
building your first, at least I wanted to be somewhat competitive, but also the collector's side, right? So building a substantial deck in order to be competitive when I went to my local events, so I wasn't just going 0-3 every single night and then instantly drop out of the game. I wanted to at least enjoy and at least feel like I had a chance to win and everything. But that started first and foremost with budgets. There are a lot of budgets you can search online when it comes to being budget friendly. I know a friend of ours that got involved with it. Actually, it might have been you, Nathaniel. You built a really budget friendly deck right away that was like $60 or something right as you got
30.
into it. $30,
Yeah.
and you did fairly well at our first local event. So there are budget friendly decks out there that can get you into the game. If you need to go down that route, and cash might not be the biggest resource for you right away, but it can be a very high initial curve when it comes to getting involved in the game. So establish your budget, know what you're willing to spend. I think is the very first thing I would very first piece of advice rather that I would give new players getting into this game.
I want to piggyback on that because there is also a game mode that was created, and I would urge you to consider checking your local area as well if that is a consideration for you. It's actually called Porcana,
Mm,
where the game style itself you are only allowed to play common and uncommon cards, which means that those decks are really never going to be more than 10 to 10 to 20-ish, maybe 30 at the high end, um, dollars to be able to build something like that. And oftentimes, I think if you're just early on, you're trying to get cards right, local players are more than happy to help you out and even like lend you a deck to play at a local can be a great way just as you're learning the game and you're starting to see like what are the more meta ones that people are using and how do they play as you're kind of on that early curve is really helpful.
You guys had great points, and I feel like everything that I've learned about the game is from either of you and then our other friends that we communicate with a lot. I don't have a ton to add, but my 2 cents would be listen to your friends and take their advice. They've been through this before. Bounce ideas off of them and kind of, lean on your support system in that way. And then you both kind of alluded to this, but find a priority system for yourself. What is important to you? Finding what that looks like is important to like maximize your dollar, make it go as far as possible. And if you are looking for specific cards, uh, do not open sealed product. Buy the specific card. It's going to be way more cost effective to get the card or the four of that card than it is to chase through sealed product to get all that. If you want the rush of opening sealed product, I'm not going to stand in the way of you having a good time because that is not what I want to stand for. But if you are chasing on a very strict budget and you're following Mac's advice to get on that budget, buy the singles. It's going to be more cost effective and way cheaper for you. Check out your local game stores, ask around with friends. Maybe they have extra bulk. They're just trying to like, I don't really care about these common and uncommons. Here's a play set of what you want. Um, but stick to your budget and also find that priority.
Yeah, and
Um,
Ryan, to jump and
yeah,
piggyback off that, you make a really good point. A lot of what we learned, I think, as a group early into this was you have to play the probability, especially when it comes to opening sealed product. Like if you're looking for a Maui half shark, first, the chances of pulling a legendary are 20%, and then each set has what, 12 legendaries? So it's like,
yeah,
okay, of the 20% chance you're going to pull a legendary, 1/12 of that is going to be a Maui half shark. So is it just more? And so how many packs do you need to open in theory in order to pull that Maui half shark? So I think it's much more cost effective, as you were alluding to just purchase the single. But again, I completely understand the people who need to open 10 packs every time with each set. It's a
yeah,
rush. The
absolutely.
idea of thinking and potentially pulling your own enchanted card is I get that rush, and we do it ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
I think most of us buy either a trove or a booster box for every set because we enjoy that rush as well. But specifically from a budget perspective, the single cards seem to be the way to go. Almost, I would say, at least 99% of the time, right?
Yeah, I
You make a
think
good point. Go ahead, Nathaniel. Yep.
yeah, to kind of build on that point, I think what I have found in my relatively short time in Lorcana is to maximize the utility of both of those experiences. I would recommend doing like the sealed event type thing at an LGS where everybody's getting the brand new stuff. There's so much hype. You get to live in that, time of like these are all new cards we're seeing for the first time ever. You get to really have this like mountaintop moment of the release where everybody's super excited about it and we're still learning what the cards actually do, how they play, how they interact. And then I think like let that be your sealed product experience, whether that's you get a booster box upon release, you go to a sealed event, you get whatever it is at your allocated budget. And then I think after that kind of first week or so, then it is really about like, okay, what are the cards that I actually want? I'm going and I'm seeking out those particular cards. That's how I transitioned from set 4 and 5 into set 6. My wallet thanked me, and I committed to a deck combination. It was just a far better format and way more cost effective. So can't recommend that enough. You can still live in a world where you get to do both, but I think that's maybe the best way to still enjoy opening, and you get to kind of ride the hype train of a release.
Yeah, absolutely. Mac mentioned troves, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is how to protect your collection. How do you store it? What do you do with it? How do you make sure that, the high value cards remain high value and don't get bent or broken or waterlogged, whatever it may be. So I'll share my storage, and because I think it's the most mundane of the bunch, and then y'all can dive into how you store yours, and we can go from there. But Mac mentioned the troves, and that's one thing that I found a lot of value in outside of just opening the packs. Obviously, there's Russian opening those packs that comes in the troves, and I think that's a staple to having that part of the troves. But ultimately, I find the trove boxes to be adequately constructed to carry around as either a deck box of mine or just to store the cards in that I am collecting or that I have accumulated. And then I have a minimalized uh, organization system. It's not necessarily by number or set order. It is organized in sets, and I'll thumb through whatever I'm looking for, whichever set I'm looking for to find the card that I want. Um, but I utilize those trove boxes as storage basically for all my cards. Anything of relatively high value, roughly $2 or more, I slot into a penny sleeve, and anything that's very valuable, immediately throw into a penny sleeve and a top loader on top of that, which is a top loader is a harder case that's larger, and the penny sleeve is just like a cheaper, just clear plastic sleeve that you can find online, either Amazon or at your local game store too. Always love supporting local game stores if they have those available for you. But they come in, packs of thousands for relatively cheap uh, dollar amounts for those penny sleeves. So that's how I store and protect my collection. How do y'all manage that aspect of massive collections? Go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, so when I first got into it, I can understand like the hesitancy to really like, oh my gosh, I pulled a legendary, what do I do with it? So I was very much the guy that used legendaries off to the side and put proxies in, but I still had um, I still had them there on the side of the playing table so people knew that they were still a part of my deck. Since then, I've eased up on that a little bit, but I think primarily, right, I would say a necessity. And you could go as cheap as you can be, but I think the basic necessity is to have card sleeves, at least for your deck. Um, 60 card sleeves, the cheaper versions can run anywhere, from $4 to $7, and then you can get into more expensive ones. You get a pack of 100 of them for about $12. So I originally bought 2 packs of some mid-tier sleeves that were about $10, and I've used those same sleeves throughout the duration of my Lorcana journey, which is pushing a year now. So card sleeves, number one. And then as started to realize how much shuffling and movement of cards that go along with the game, I did transition to double sleeving. So I had a very thin penny sleeve, and then I put that into my card sleeve. So I have a double sleeve for my cards, and that just makes me personally the investment of a penny sleeve, a pack of 100, like Ryan was alluding to, for a couple bucks made me just like consciously feel better about playing with these more expensive cards, and I'm doubly protecting them. So I think that's it. When it comes to bulk, they make like these cardboard shoebox bulk type of cases or containers. I use that for a lot of my bulk. I organize by set and then by color within this kind of shoebox looking thing. And then for anything that's more higher of value, I do the at least a sleeve, but I've had a big set of top loaders just through other card games I've played in the past. So I had a good collection of them, but top loaders aren't really that expensive either, and you get anywhere. Some of them are packs of 25 or up to packs of 50, I believe. For the really expensive legendaries and all the enchantments I've pulled, I've done a sleeve with the top loader route too, just to keep everything a little bit more protective and longer lasting.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of along similar routes to that, Mac. I think from the beginning I was like sleeving up lots of cards that were like, oh, if it's even a cold foil, right? And till you find out that like that cold foil is worth a quarter. Um, so yeah, I think it's important to establish that. I will say this, um, as far as like the actual storage of your deck, getting good sleeves is you'll be happy you did so
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. I went and bought some of those like somewhat cheaper ones that kind of look like the Dragon Shield. Dragon Shield's a brand of sleeve for your cards. They do other stuff, I'm sure too, but they're kind of famous for like making some of the best card sleeves. Um, and I've noticed a very clear difference with how you handle the cards themselves when you get nice ones. And again, nice sleeves, it's 100 of them for $12. So you're gonna thank yourself later when you have potentially at some point in your roller kind of journey a two, three, $400 deck. You're gonna be happy that you invested the $12 to protect the cards the way you needed to. Um, I have gone down the route of double sleeving some decks because the Disney Lorcana artwork sleeves are, I think, in my opinion, they are very pretty, but they are not the most durable.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to kind of peel, or the art sort of it fades off, right? And as soon as you kind of have any of that happen, you're concerned about getting kind of a judge called on you, right, at a tournament, because you can't have any sort of clear identifying things on your sleeves or your cards that would, what marked cards, right, like all that type of stuff that you're considering. So I just proactively went and got the Dragon Shield outer sleeves, and then would put the card in the Disney Lorcana artwork, and then the artwork sleeve into the um, outer
Clear
sleeve, they
the
call
clear
them,
outers.
the transparent outer sleeves. So it would still be, I could use those. I could still kind of have. That's what I have the Honey Wizard Pooh Bear sleeves. I have them in that secondary outer shield. Sorry, outer sleeve, dragon shield sleeve, so they're very protected. The card is super protected. Then it just feels ginormous in your hand. So I think that's the only thing I would add on to that that hasn't already been said in terms of storage. I like the Trove boxes. I think they look pretty. They're not the greatest. I think those kind of shoebox style white boxes that Mack was alluding to is probably the best for storing lots and lots of cards at once in terms of like bulk and kind of thumbing through that. But I just love the way that the Troves display in my office where I have my cards. So um, I tend to put I've got mine by color. So I've got each trove has an ink color in it, and then that's sorted by set. So I can
Mm.
very easily
Oh,
find the card I'm looking for, um, which is nice. And then if it's sleeved in that set, it's usually going to be something that's either a little bit worth more or it's a super rare. I think has been usually the ones that I'll sleeve up. But um,
sure.
I think actually I kind of wanted to transition this conversation to in terms of the storage of your cards to um, some of the prioritizing piece of this, right? So like I know we all feel a certain type of way about cold foils. Some people love to foil out their deck or maximum rarity of their deck. They're playing enchanteds in their decks. Um, I think Ryan and I are on one page where we generally kind of say, I would rather trade the foil genie and get two normal genies than have the one foil one. So I'm usually prioritizing just more meta cards, and I don't care about the rarity of them necessarily if it means I can get more cards to add to the collection.
Yeah, I'm on board with that, as Nathaniel alluded to. My goal in this, my priority is funding a playable competitive scene for myself, a competitive outlet, if you will, kind of utilizing Lorcana as that competitive outlet in my life, coming from a history of competitive sports all through high school, undergrad, and even a little bit into grad school, still doing like local men's leagues wherever I was living. That competitive aspect has always been part of my life. So this is one of these outlets that I'm using Larcana for. And so my value, my goal, my priority is, any high value cards I have. If I'm not going to be using it in a deck that I want to be playing, then I'm going to be trying to trade it for other cards that I want to include in that deck, that I do want to be playing. So if I have anything foiled out, I usually try to. I'll play it if I need it as one of my playset cards, if it's one of the ones that I end up pulling. But otherwise, if it's an off color or something like that that I'm not interested in at the moment, then I'll just try to trade it for something else and come back around later if I do want to end up playing that color again, and just buying the non cold foil version for at a cheaper price point, or trading it at a cheaper price point, if you will. So that's kind of where I'm at with that, on that collection piece and prioritization piece. Mac, where are you at with that?
Yeah, I guess first and foremost, I have really no interest or no opinion in playing with cold foils. That doesn't matter to me. I don't need to slap a cold foil down or have a fully foiled out deck for my opponent to think that I'm a shiny new toy or anything. I'm just there to play the game, right? There's
Yeah.
only one card I've ever played as a foil, and that's because that was the only card that would fill out a playset, and that's still the case with that specific playset, and that happens to be the set 3 Jafar Striking Illusionist. I had three. I happened to pull a cold foil, and I'm like, I guess I want to try the Jafar wheel deck, so I guess I'll try it, and I needed that foil for that. Still don't have my hands on the fourth regular one, but to summarize, like it doesn't matter to me foiling out. However, I will also never play with an enchanted card. To me, that just seems so risky to play with an enchanted card
Oh,
to potentially damage it and lose the value. I think coming from a collector's mentality, right? Me initially getting into this game to collect all these cards, um, that just terrifies me to potentially ruin that high value of a card. Um, it's cool when my opponent does it, but when they do it, I still have that thing in the back of my head like, wow, you are taking a risk and you really don't care about it.
yeah.
But yeah, I will never play with an enchanted. And I found myself too from the collector's mentality. It's really hard for me to trade my enchanteds, even if I have multiple copies of them. So it's like I really only need one copy of an enchanted, and I could get so much more value out of trading one of my enchanted cards, as Nathaniel alluded to a potentially obtain more important cards for your competitive deck building. So I've tried to start turning that stone over. and I'm in the middle of kind of organizing my enchanteds based on never trade or sell to I would prefer not to okay, I could sell and trade this one. So I'm still getting used to that aspect of the game as well.
Yeah,
That
I
is
have.
interesting. You've been on a journey, it sounds like, Mac, with your prioritization. What were you gonna say, Nathaniel?
I was gonna say I have thought about if at some point in the future, if I ran a Ruby deck, I would throw maybe one of the scars from the set champs, just because that's not like a crazy expensive card, and I do think it's a cool one, even though it like totally didn't match the theme of that set, in my opinion. But it's a
Yeah.
cool card, and it's not worth like crazy money. It's not a Tamatoa from Arcasia's Island. It's
No,
a
that
at this point I think it's a $35 card, so it wouldn't be. There's legendaries that are Rapunzels are worth more than that card at this point.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm with you. I generally probably won't do that. And there's even like if I have a bunch of like a particular card to have the foil, maybe I'll put it in there because it's foil crab is worth 50 cents instead of 20 cents. But some of these cards they really do jump in value from being a cold foil. I think the one in particular that I had pulled recently that was crazy was I'd got my hands on a Floodborn set, a couple packs, and a standard rabbit is worth like $1.50. Merlin rabbit. A foil is like 25. Like, I mean, like
that's
what a jump,
unreal.
right? And there's other cards, right, where it's like the Elsa Fifth Spirit. The standards 5 6. The foil is 8. It's like it's a few dollars more, or even some of the, I think even like Maui Half Shark, it might only go up like 10, so like 45 to 55. But some of these they really do jump up a pretty crazy amount. So I think those for me are like the prime like trade targets where it's like I think I traded a Hiram foil once because it was like standard Hiram, $2, foil Hiram, 20. It's like, yeah, I'd rather get the playset of Hiram plus $10 than one foil Hiram, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. To bring some closure back to that sleeves conversation earlier, just to make sure we get some final talking points here. Single versus double sleeves. Preferred sleeving method currently. It doesn't have to be forever or in the past, but right now, in this moment, what is your preferred single versus double sleeves? Nathaniel, go.
I think for style points, I love double sleeving. Now that I have the Honey Wizard playmat, I'd love to break out the Honey Wizard sleeves in their protective double sleeve just for the artwork. But for practicality, comfort, speed of shuffling, everything that makes more sense in my brain, good single sleeves, some Dragon Shield standard sleeves. You could penny sleeve and then like the perfect fit and like inner sleeve and then put them in there so they would still technically be double sleeved. Um, I think that's the way to go. The deck doesn't become a giant tower. The cards fit in your hand a lot better. I'm not a big guy. I don't have huge hands, so holding all these cards in my amethyst deck, right? It's hard when you're holding a grip on 10 cards and they're double sleeved. So I'm pretty good. I've done enough of both now where I think I'm pretty convinced that for comfort and playability, I'm just gonna go with a single sleeve of
I've got
quality.
little hands. I've got just little hands. Mac, what
Like
is
that
your
Whopper
preferred?
commercial from Burger
Yeah.
King years ago.
Mac,
I
what's your preferred? Single versus double?
Yeah, I've transitioned to the inner penny sleeve into a Dragon Shield type sleeve right now. Especially with the deck I play. I play primary Ruby Sapphire, and there are a lot of half sharks and Maldragons and big Sisus and stuff like that. The more expensive legendary cards that I get a little bit nervous if they're only single sleeves. So I've transitioned to the double sleeve style.
Penny sleeve with a single, like a normal dragon sleeve, dragon shield out or
Yeah,
dragon shield adjacent, if you will.
I'd be
Right
totally
on, right
fine
on.
just doing the Dragon Shield, but it's just more peace of mind for my own sanity.
For sure, for sure. I personally am now on the single sleeve train. I recently, for the first deck that I built, I was in double sleeves, and it was massive in my hands. And I feel like I have decently sized hands, and it still felt very big. I got very used to shuffling it, and I was very comfortable with that process. And now that I'm in the single sleeves and have been shuffling it a little bit, it's very much more comfortable and a much easier play experience. So I am on the single sleeve train. I do not play the Maui Half Shark, Mal Dragon, expensive Ruby Sapphire decks. But that being said, I still have single sleeves as my preferred. All right, one last topic for us to talk about for anybody new getting into the game. and wants to be competitive, how do you choose an ink color for starting out with?
Yeah, I can go first with that one. For me, I had just watched a couple streams, as I was learning the game, and I found I liked having as much ink as possible to play the biggest cards possible. So that's why I landed on Sapphire and Ruby, that specific combination. With that combination, the Sapphire builds up your inkwell as fast as possible, and then Ruby tends to have a lot of those big closing cards, especially when it comes to board wiping. Um, Especially, and also speaking of, like Sapphire does too, like big Tamatoas. You have Maui Half Shark, playing a beat prepared 2 turns earlier than when your opponent's expecting. Lucky Dime, some of these big playing cards that really close the game from a control type of style. I've really enjoyed taking my time, methodically going through, building up the inkwell, and then slapping down these huge, big character cards or item cards that my opponent really just can't wrap their hands around, and I kind of bleed them out that way. That's kind of been the style I've enjoyed, and that's the where I tend to land when it comes to choosing an ink color.
Fair enough. You started mentioning a little bit of kind of color identity, and I when I started in this game, Nathaniel provided a very succinct and clear description of that. 2 minutes or less, Nathaniel, would you like to provide that clear color identity for each of the different ink colors for our listeners?
Yeah, so I think I kind of ran through like because Connor kind of when I first got into the game was like figure out what you kind of like and describe your personality and this and that. And it took me a while to figure it out, but you're kind of thinking about like blue is you're gonna ramp ink. Right? This is distilling it down to the kind of base level, right? This is not. I'm very much oversimplifying. Purple is more about like I'm gonna draw cards. Um, Ruby is more about like aggressive, like challenging and having like stronger characters. Steel has certain elements of like removal and singing songs and kind of clever ways of dealing damage. And then Amber is kind of about like healing and there's a lot of like more aggressive style decks, but you're figuring out your ink color alongside with your playstyle. So if you're going to be control, mid range, more aggressive, right? You have all these variations of what you're figuring out, and it took me a long, long time to figure out what I wanted to do, and I was buying cards along the way. Would not recommend doing it that way. There's a lot of digital opportunities for you. We'd mentioned Inktable at the top of the call. That's a great way for you, even if it's just against an AI, to start understanding different ink color combinations, different cards, and you'll figure out what you like to do a little bit there. And then, I would advise just before you commit a lot of money to a certain deck or a certain color combination to just really, like Max said, take it slow, figure it, like learn the game first, learn more about how you want to play before you say, okay, I'm going to go with this one and it's only $475 to build it. I would recommend not doing it that way.
Sure. Sure, sure. I think you left off one color combination or one color when you were talking about the ink color identities, and that's emerald. And that emerald identity that I don't think you currently identify with, Nathaniel, is discard, is what it's
Yeah, I
best
know
known
his
for.
set 5 staple he left out.
Yeah, emerald is your discard. It's where you're interacting with the other player's hand is one of the common themes in a lot of those cards. The other one is this evasiveness of the emerald card. So they usually lower um, strength and willpower for that matter. So lower survivability or lower like physical challenging, but more like creative, trying to get around it and evade being attacked or dealt with. So that's emerald for you for all the listeners out there. So follow follow online. There's a lot of other resources out there on YouTube or wherever you may find any information on this through a search engine. And they are some other summaries of that too that you could tune into and find that. That's where I went. But hopefully this is a brief little synopsis for you to start your journey in Lorcana. Um, Rounding out the call then, since we're getting to time and we promised our listeners we were going to do better this time. What is one way that each of you have actively balanced life in Lorcana this in the recent past? For me, it was finding time on a lunch break, not necessarily to play a game, but just to get on a call and talk about Lorcana. with Nathaniel, since I had a PTO day, and we were both off and just had a free moment. So just chatting about it for half an hour and fitting that little piece of Lorcana into my life and around my schedule where I had some free time to fit it in, where it wasn't taking away from dad duties, from spouse duties, from work duties to fit this hobby into my life. Where have y'all found some success with that?
Big thing, having the conversation around your budget. What are you committing to this? And then planning for the events that you want to go to. Um, Carving the time out in advance. Huge.
Right, and I would echo that too. I mean, we ourselves, we're in a group of five, pretty consistent players and friends amongst us, right? And when we choose these events, we choose them to attend together. So that way we're not sporadically just trying to attend random things. I think choosing events, if you have some friends involved with you guys, that's been really fun and narrowing the focus on that. Um, Also communication with your family and how you want to go about establishing not only a budget but the overall competitive nature you want to do with the game. Um, for me, I tend to play and go out to the local scene about once every 2 weeks. That's the thing that's worked well for me and my wife. Trying to balance a toddler at our house as well. So I established what you're looking to get out of the game, whether it's once a month, once a week, once every other week, and so you can get that fix, so to speak, when it comes to playing the game, but also the kind of the work-life balance as well, and being able to maintain that part of life. So that's the way I do it. I also listen to a couple podcasts, YouTube videos throughout my work day. That's helped me really well. I tend to work better when there's some background music or some
For
soft
sure.
noise going on. So that's helped me keep involved and keep me up to date on the meta game as well.
For sure. Wow. Well, we covered a lot of topics. There's a lot to chew on when you're first starting out in the Lorcana game. Feel free to lean on your support group, talk to those around you, find a Facebook group to message in, and always reach out to anybody in the community because that's the one thing that I want to stress to everybody is that the community is very welcoming and open to new players, to anybody new to the game. And just wanting to talk about anything from I don't know what card to pick, or I don't even know what this card does, to higher level strategies regarding deck building and competitive play. So feel free to reach out. And with that, we will close this episode of the podcast. Thank you all for listening. We look forward to seeing you on the next part of this adventure. Good luck and have fun out there.